Thank y'all for the opportunity to share knowledge. It's wonderful to see so many experts, researchers, and land managers here, and I'm really excited to learn from each of you today. My name is Jessie Danninger. I work for Utah's Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands as the Bear River Area's Sovereign Lands Program Manager. Next week will actually mark my 1-year anniversary for working for the division at Bear Lake. And back in July, we also hired Ray Robinson, who is our restoration coordinator for the Bear River area. She's also attending the symposium. Ray and I have spent the summer taking in as much information about Bear Lake as possible, particularly the invasive plants. But with that being said, keep in mind that some of the data and the information that I'm going to share with you today is limited to files that were left behind from my predecessors. But I'll do my best to share the history of invasive plants at Bear Lake based on what I have. So let's go ahead and start with our monitoring methods. So Forestry, Fire, and State Lands worked with the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food in 2019 to come up with a monitoring method that, from my understanding, was based on Idaho State Department of Agriculture's methods, but altered just a little bit. In years prior, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands monitoring efforts for Eurasia water milfoil were mostly limited to hotspot areas where recreation is high. Each year, polygons were determined for these areas, and a grid was established within these polygons. The grid lines were 100 meters apart, and points are sampled at the crosshairs of each of these grid lines. And at these points, a rake is thrown, and percent cover of milfoil on the rake is recorded. On these maps here, so we have all the green points, means there's no Eurasian water milfoil, and the yellow is there was a low cover, less than 25% of the rake. Orange is 25 to 75% of the rake, and then the red is high, greater than 75% cover. As you can see, the monitoring points were never in the same location, and the polygons were never the same across the years. However, each year the monitoring efforts grew to incorporate more shoreline. One goal that Ray and I had as part of us learning everything we could about Bear Lake was to monitor the entire Utah shoreline. So we ditched the polygons and we created grid lines around the entire lake based on elevation. This was a massive undertaking, but with the help from Bear Lake Watch, Utah Department of Agriculture and Food, and our FFSL staff, we were able to accomplish that goal and monitor the entire lake. We plan to do this moving forward each year. Something to note, this year, we decided to be most efficient with our monitoring efforts. We were not going to distinguish between Native and Eurasian. We found that most rakes we were throwing were coming back with mixed and Eurasian, and for time's sake, we couldn't have everybody counting leaflet pairs, as not all of us are professional botanists. We felt justified with this decision because we also want to prevent the hybridization of Native and Eurasian. This year, we were fortunate enough to work with Marilla Ortiz at Utah State, who has a genetic lab. We sent a handful of samples for her to test, and I believe she will be sharing the results of those with you next. All right, so we're definitely learning a lot. So part of our learning, we started to recognize some downsides to using the point intercept method, one of which is being that large patches of milfoil could be missed in between our 100-meter grid lines. We're still evaluating if this is the best method to use moving forward, considering time and labor. But let's go ahead and chat about some of the methods we are considering. In the past, we have flown a drone, and it was used with the intention of reviewing the imagery to find aquatic vegetation. And you can see here in this picture, the clear blue Bear Lake water allows us to see the vegetation from the drone. However, this would still need to be ground truth because it's impossible to tell if the vegetation is in fact milfoil. This tool also is a little bit limiting because only one of our area staff members is currently licensed to fly a drone, and conditions have to be just right to capture images and to be able to fly. And then this underwater drone. A few weeks ago, Dave Cottle was gracious enough to show us his underwater drone. As you can see from the video footage here, you can clearly tell what is milfoil and what is not. Over the winter, we plan to explore the use of this technology to see how it could complement our ongoing efforts and potentially invest in an underwater drone for next year. And then also last week, our contractor showed us some of the data that he collected using the bio-based technology. We were really excited about the potential of this technology and the ability it has to reduce the labor needed to monitor milfoil, as well as its ability to capture a more accurate picture of milfoil's footprint on the lake compared to our point intercept methods. This is another tool that we plan to explore this winter, but we have high hopes that it could work well for us next summer. All right, let's move on to our treatments. So for the last 5 years, Forestry Fire and State Lands has treated Eurasian water milfoil using Priscillacor. Historically, the lake has been treated sometime in September, but no post-monitoring efforts were conducted to determine efficacy. As you can see from these maps here, they treated varying acreage and locations around the lake each year. So in 2020, we have they treated 46 acres, 2021, 87 acres, 2022, 101 acres. In 2023, they were able to treat 62 acres. And then this year, in 2024, we were fortunate enough to receive additional funding, and we were able to treat nearly 200 acres of open water from milfoil. After consulting with our contractor and Marilla Ortiz from USU, we decided to treat a little bit earlier in mid-August. We also treated nearly 20 acres in the 5 marinas across the lake, but I'll come back to that in just a minute. All in all, we treated almost 220 acres for aquatic invasives at Bear Lake this year. I would like to just take a moment to note that this would not have been possible if the legislation did not put more funding towards Bear Lake. Priscillacor is a very expensive herbicide. We use funding from our annual weeds budget, grant money from the Invasive Species Mitigation Program with UDAF, and funding from a recent legislation appropriation. Now the big question, is it working? As part of our learning, Ray and I wanted to see for ourselves 3 to 4 weeks post-treatment what exactly we would find. Our findings this year are inconclusive. We found some Eurasian water milfoil with swollen nodes, twisted and shriveled leaves, and mushy stems. But more often than not, we're finding healthy green Eurasian water milfoil. This may be controversial, but we find it difficult to definitively say that Priscillacor has been effective. As this is the first year there was a comprehensive survey of the entire lake and monitoring was not as consistent in the past, it's difficult to keep track of the established milfoil populations. However, based on what we saw this summer, we would have expected to see more plant damage after spraying. In 2022, my predecessor decided to conduct an experiment and treat one of the marinas, Azure Cove, with aquatic approved 2,4-D. Within 3 weeks of treatment, the milfoil had wilted and started decaying. In 2023, no milfoil was found in this marina. And then again, in 2024, we found no milfoil in the marina. All other marinas continued to support thriving milfoil populations despite repeated years of Priscillacor treatment, leaving us to question whether or not the herbicide has been effective. And then this year we had our own experiment. A moment ago, I told you I'd come back to the 20 acres that were treated across the 5 marinas at Bear Lake this year. We found curly leaf pondweed in all 5 marinas on the lake. It was not something that was on our radar before. So this was the first year it was treated at Bear Lake. We treated all 5 marinas in mid-July with Diquat and Aquathol. This herbicide combination is meant to treat both curly leaf and milfoil. We came back to survey a few weeks post-treatment and found no curly leaf or milfoil surviving. And when we came back 2 months later, as we were conducting our post-monitoring for our Priscillacor treatment, we did a second round of surveying the marinas and found patches of milfoil in some of them. With all that being said, this winter, we plan to evaluate what we learned at Bear Lake this year. We want to explore what other monitoring methods or tools we could use instead of our point intercept method or to complement what we already have. And we also want to investigate different herbicide options and the best course of treatment. Thank you all for listening. Here's my contact information. I'm happy to share any of our data if anybody wants to take a closer look.